Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're diving into a seriously fascinating new explainer. We're going to take a journey from the microscopic, hidden depths of the anxious brain all the way out to the macro level of the modern workplace. We're unpacking the exact architecture of anxiety, how it originates in our neural pathways, the intense, cascading effects it has on our physical bodies, and how our environments either trigger or soothe these deeply ingrained biological alarms. Let's get right into it.
To really grasp why this matters so much right now, we just have to look at the massive scale of the issue. According to data from the World Health Organization, a staggering 15% of all working-age adults were estimated to have a mental disorder in 2019. Think about that for a second. That means if you're sitting in a meeting or just riding on a commuter train, a really significant portion of the people right around you are navigating these internal struggles every single day.
So, the crucial point here is that this isn't just an individual struggle, It's a global economic crisis. Every single year, the global cost and lost productivity due to depression and anxiety reaches $1 trillion. Yes, trillion with a T. That is an absolutely astronomical figure, and it proves we literally can no longer afford to ignore the architecture of mental health.
Okay, so here's the roadmap for our explainer today. We'll be covering the scope of anxiety, inside the anxious brain, physical symptoms of anxiety, mental health at work, and finally, we'll wrap up with some highly effective strategies for management.
Moving right along to Section 2, Inside the Anxious Brain, the Neurobiology of Fear.
Let's zoom all the way in, because to truly understand anxiety, we have to look way past the psychological symptoms and examine the microscopic level of our neurobiology. We need to look at exactly where the origins of anxiety disorders actually live inside our heads. And well, everything starts right here, in the amygdala. This almond-shaped structure nestled deep in the side of your brain, specifically the medial temporal lobe, is essentially your biological alarm system. It's totally responsible for evaluating sensory information and deciding if you're in danger. But for the 40 million adults in the US alone who suffer from anxiety, this threat evaluator gets hyperactive. It starts seeing danger where there is none, ringing that alarm bell over and over again, and basically keeping the brain in a constant state of fear.
But thankfully, the brain does have a built-in manager, and that's the prefrontal cortex, or PFC. Located right at the front of your brain, this is the logical control center. It handles all those higher-order functions like decision-making and planning. When a healthy brain gets an alarm from the amygdala, the PFC steps in, assesses the situation logically, and basically exerts top-down control to calm those emotions right down if the threat isn't actually real.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core neurobiological conflict of anxiety. When the connection between these two areas breaks down, you get a massive imbalance. The amygdala is hyperactive, just flooding the system with fear responses, while the prefrontal cortex becomes dysfunctional. It's unable to step in and exert that necessary top-down logical control. And without the PFC hitting the brakes, the brain falls into persistent worry, fear, and just endless rumination.
So how does this mental loop turn into physical sensation? Well, that happens largely because of a region deep within the cerebral cortex called the insula. The insula controls what's called interoceptive awareness, which is basically how you perceive your own internal bodily states. When the insula is hyperactive, anxious individuals become hyper-aware of every single heartbeat and breath. This heightens the subjective experience of anxiety, and it essentially bridges the gap between the brain's invisible misfires and the physical body.
Which brings us to Section 3, Physical Symptoms of Anxiety, when the body reacts.
Let's zoom out from those brain structures to examine the cascading fight-or-flight response that wreaks absolute havoc on our physical bodies. Look, if you've ever felt physically ill from stress, you are definitely not alone. Actually, research published in the Journal of Clinical Psychology indicates that a massive 87% of individuals with generalized anxiety disorder report significant physical symptoms. Anxiety is not just a psychological state, right? It is a full-body biological response. Okay, let's really dive into this. When your brain sounds the alarm, it activates your sympathetic nervous system, dumping adrenaline and cortisol straight into your body. Just look at the cardiovascular system. Your heart can be 20 to 30% faster than its resting rate just to pump blood to major muscles. Over in the respiratory system, 60% of panic attack sufferers cite shortness of breath as their absolute worst symptom. In the digestive tract, anxious individuals are 5 times more likely to develop irritable bowel syndrome. And musculoskeletally, 75% of sufferers deal with chronic muscle tension. It's an exhausting, system-wide activation for sure. In fact, the cardiovascular symptoms are so intense that they often mimic life-threatening emergencies.
Striking data from the Cleveland Clinic reveals that a full 25% of all emergency room visits for chest pain are actually attributed to anxiety, not cardiac issues. The muscle tension and rapid breathing can create chest tightness so severe that people genuinely, truly believe they're having a heart attack.
And when your body is this wired, shutting down becomes nearly impossible. National Sleep Foundation data shows that 70% of adults with anxiety disorders report difficulty falling or staying asleep. This creates a brutal bidirectional trap. Anxiety disrupts your sleep, and then the sleep deprivation severely worsens your physical symptoms the very next day.
So we've explored the microscopic brain structures and the resulting physical shock waves throughout the body, but obviously we don't exist in a vacuum. We really have to ask, how do these hypersensitive internal biological alarms react to the external daily environments we live in?
Section 4. Mental health at work. The modern stressor.
To answer that question, we must zoom out to the macro environment where working-age adults spend the vast majority of their waking hours, the modern workplace. The World Health Organization has clearly identified what they call psychosocial risks at work. These are massive environmental triggers for anxiety. Just look at this list. Excessive workloads and severe understaffing demand constant adrenaline. Inflexible hours and a lack of control over job design, that directly undermines the prefrontal cortex's ability to plan and regulate. Add in poor physical conditions or workplace discrimination, and the modern office can essentially act as an ongoing trauma for an already hyperactive amygdala.
Now, what is truly staggering about this is the sheer volume of the fallout. When we combine susceptible brain chemistry with highly stressful work environments, the global result is an estimated 12 billion working days lost every single year to depression and anxiety. That's enough to completely derail global progress. Ignoring workplace mental health is catastrophically expensive, and it's just completely unsustainable.
And that leads us to our final section, strategies for management, regaining control.
But listen, it's not hopeless. Moving into the solution phase of our explainer, let's outline exactly how to combat these biological and environmental factors so we can regain control over both the mind and the body. The first line of defense is actually right there in your own body, and hey, it's free. This is the 4-7-8 breathing method. You inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 7, and exhale for 8. By intentionally slowing down your breathing, you directly counteract the hyperventilation triggered by the fight-or-flight response. Research shows this technique reduces your heart rate by an average of 15% within just minutes, literally sending a physical safety signal back up to the brain.
And there's a highly effective, comprehensive treatment arsenal to back that up too. Progressive muscle relaxation can reduce muscle tension by 35%. Regular aerobic exercise burns off that excess adrenaline and drops anxiety symptoms by 30%. Next, mindfulness practices, which actually train your brain not to overreact to the insula's internal signals, yield an average 40% symptom reduction. And of course, there's cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, which helps the prefrontal cortex reassert logical control, improving physical symptoms in a whopping 75% of patients. Finally, pharmacological interventions like SSRIs and beta blockers work to rebalance serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine right at the synaptic level.
So we've seen how a microscopic shift in the brain can cascade into a massive full-body response, and how our high-pressure workplaces can literally pour fuel on that fire. But we've also seen the incredible power of strategic, targeted interventions. So, I'll leave you with this provocative thought. As we navigate a modern world built for constant alertness, what is one structural change you can make to your environment today to quiet the alarms in your brain? Thank you so much for joining this explainer, and I truly hope this knowledge empowers you to build a calmer tomorrow.